Okay, I thought I'd do a quick video of my electrical endeavors on my 1973 FJ40 Resto-Mod. This is the entire electrical harness that's laid out here on the floor of my dining room. I thought I'd kind of walk through some of the things that I've done to upgrade this truck with some creature comforts and so forth. So here we go. First thing that's important to understand is that this has a 3FE fuel-injected engine out of a 92 80 series wagon. So you'll see here, the computer and some of the ancillary electrical components necessary to run the engine management system. So that required that I basically graft an FJ40 3FE wiring harness into the existing FJ40 harness. And in doing so, I basically cut away everything that wasn't required to drive the engine management sensors, and the only thing that's really left from the original FJ40 harness at this point is the turn signals and stoplight. I even went so far as replacing the original glass fuse, 8 or 9 position glass fuse panel with a ATC fuse box off of an FJ62, which with a little modification bolts onto the stock location in the tub without issue. You can also see that's my first relay panel. That's high beam and low beam relay, as well as my switched ignition and EFI relays that take some of the electrical load off of the ignition switch, which is pretty small compared to the later model trucks. And the center of my most recent modifications to this wiring harness is this Dakota Digital HDX gauge cluster, and it's obviously driven by a computer here that has the ability to expand to add-on modules, and you can see I've got a couple piggybacked here as well as this one. So this gives me extra functionality over the basic HDX gauge package. When I was driving this truck after what I call the first restoration, some of the problems I was having with that 3FE injected motor, I think related to either oxygen sensors, the mixture. I had some mixture issues, and I also had what I believe to be some issues with fuel pressure on occasion. And so when I installed this HDX, I made sure to get myself a fuel pressure module as well as a fuel air mixture module. So this, I've got a sensor that I've tapped and threaded onto the fuel rail, so I'll be able to read live fuel pressure readings, as well as a wideband oxygen sensor and controller. So I'll be able to get live information as I'm driving on that score. This here is a GPS unit, which I'm not using it for the speed sensor capability, but I am going to get compass, altimeter, and ambient air temperature off of this, as well as an input from my cruise control. So the HDX unit itself, obviously it has this really nice TFT display here, which is kind of washed out unless I turn it on night mode. And so a lot of the information from those additional modules is output on this display here, which is pretty trick. Another thing that I went through my original Resto-Mod was that I added a auxiliary fuel tank to the rear of the truck, and using a 6-position Pollock valve, I'm able to select the primary tank or the auxiliary tank, and when the valve changes over, it also changes over the fuel sender. But the trick here was that I'm using 2 Tanks Inc. in-tank fuel pumps, a dedicated pump for each fuel tank. So I had to figure out how to select power to the appropriate fuel pump dependent on the Carling switch position. And I did that through the use of this relay box over here. So using a 5-pin relay, I'm able to select power to the appropriate pump that's synchronized with that Carling switch and the fuel sender. And I know this kind of looks like a hot steamy mess right now, but it's because it's 2-dimensional. it's all laid on the floor. Once it goes in the truck, these come out of the firewall in different locations, and they branch down into different locations. So I think it'll work okay. There's my ARB onboard air, and this is the chassis harness going to the rear of the truck. Yes, that is my table that is blocking the door here so that my dogs stay out while I'm doing this. I'm adding some additional circuits for power door locks and central locking, as well as keyless. So this is actually just a door harness that'll mount inside the door. We've got a solenoid there and a power window motor on that side. Coming back over here, another thing I added was 30 amp trailer brake service and a proportional brake controller that should come in handy in the future. I plan on building an expo trailer of sorts that I'll be able to tow behind the truck, so I wanted to have a brake controller wired in from the beginning. There's the keyless entry and the central locking solenoids, and that is a cruise control module there from Rostra that was rebranded, I guess, and sold through Dakota Digital. So I know some of this seems a little silly on an old FJ40, but some of this stuff I have good cause to add. The cruise control in particular, when I drive long distance, my foot will go to sleep and start cramping because there's not a lot of leg room in that truck. So I think the cruise will come in handy. The power windows, I'll admit, kind of silly, but I'm looking forward to having some of the creature comforts, and some of it is honestly just kind of the challenge of, can I do it and can I make it look right and do it correctly. My wife's going to be a big fan of the air conditioning that I'm putting in. It's one of her chief complaints with the truck, is that it's just uncomfortably hot in the warm temps here that we get in Nevada. So AC, it's got electronic servos for the defrost function as well as the heater. It puts out a good amount of air. I'm pretty pleased with it. However, it's going to be somewhat difficult to get everything crammed under that dash. There is not a lot of space to play with under there. I tried to use, where are they? The entire harness got Deutsch weatherproof connectors, replacing the old spade connectors everywhere that was possible. There's only a handful that I didn't change, or that I wasn't able to change. The Deutsch connectors, I haven't seen any that go beyond 12 pins on the pinout. So I used these for the interior connectors that required more pinout. These are from a cowl harness on an FJ40. I tried to use all Toyota stuff where I could, just because I'm a snob in that sense. And again, you see we've got keyless entry here, and or central locking, I guess, on both doors, as well as power windows, which I have yet to figure out exactly how I'm going to route some of that stuff. But that's part of the fun of it. So coming back over here, I wanted to mention briefly that I've got this Tuffy console, and you see I haven't put them back in, but I've got a USB charger and a cigarette lighter that sit there, and then I've got controls for the heated seats and a pair of lights. This one I've actually, let me step around here. I've actually wired this to a LED controller that you see faintly, a light turning on there, that I plan to put a 5 meters worth of LED lights around the interior portion of the rain gutter of the hardtop, just so I get some indirect lighting. We'll see how it works. If it's hokey, I'll take it out and do something else, but that's driven off of a relay in that relay panel I showed you. This one's kind of interesting as well, because this truck has tinted windows that I kind of did a little darker than I probably should have. I'm not all that thrilled with the way it came out at this point, but because of the tinted windows, the reverse light is a little too dim for backing up under most conditions, and it's a little uncomfortable. So I'd wired in one of these LED lights that mount to my swing out tire carrier back here for manual. One of them's tied into the backup light circuit, but the other one is tied into this manual switch here. And as you can see, it puts out a good amount of light. The problem with it was my cup holders sit really close to the front of this console, and I had always been concerned that I would inadvertently leave the switch on and be driving around, with the light hanging out the back of the truck. So one of the neat things about this HTX instrument panel is that it gives you the ability to wire in a pair of extra inputs, a 12-volt input and a switched ground input. So I'm going to focus in here. You'll see that when I turn this switch on, I have a programmable alert basically that pops up indicating that that rear light is on, and I can also program that to have an audible alarm as well, you know, if I so desired. And the ground trigger I put on the back of the harness will also give me an indication that I left my swing out tire carrier unhooked. If you look under here, I don't know how well you can see that, what I kind of wanted to do with this Tuffy console, believe it or not, this thing ends up coming out quite frequently as I keep tinkering with this truck. And the way it was originally wired with my radio and stereo receiver in there, and the subwoofer hookups and the heated seats and everything that powers this panel up front, it was kind of a pain in the butt to unplug everything every time I needed to take it out. So I kind of took the time on this go around to wire in a pair of bulkhead mounts for these Deutsch connectors. So I can just basically plug and unplug the entire console and pick it up and take it out. Totally unnecessary, kind of geeky, but I like it, and I think it'll save me some time and headache in the future. Okay, so the only other things worth mentioning, you can see my oxygen sensor there. That's not the oxygen sensor that drives the computer inputs. It is rather a wideband that I'm going to put downstream of the factory O2 sensors, and that's just for monitoring, you know, the fuel mixture as I'm driving, so I can help troubleshoot any potential problems I might have. And there's my speed sensor. We walk around this way. Kind of a last-minute addition that I decided to wire in, since there's no good reason not to at this point, is a courtesy light for the underside of the dashboard, or excuse me, not the dashboard, the hood. So that's going to be triggered on a little contact trigger here, a little ground switch that I'm going to mount on the bib of the passenger side fender. So when the hood's closed, you know, obviously the switch is out, and then if I pop the hood open, I should get a nice dome light sort of deal on the hood. And that will actually, it's not done, I've just started doing this, will terminate right here. So that's kind of forthcoming. This coil here is my front fog lights that I've wired in to a factory pull switch on the dash. And then this little box back here is part of my experiment for my power distribution. Right now this is just wired in, it's all obviously very temporary, but my primary 12-volt leads are all just kind of grouped together. I'm dumping the original fusible links. I don't like those old fusible link wires. Rather, I'm going to try to use and adapt a power distribution box like this, where I can customize the fusible links here and still incorporate a battery cutoff switch that will interrupt power from the battery. I think that is about it. This is kind of an evolving process, but as you can see, this little FJ40 harness has grown exponentially, and I'll admit it's a little silly, but I've had fun with it, and we'll see how it works once I get it in the truck.